Hello everyone, it's Elliot here. In this video, I'm going to be looking at what I think are the best Criterion Collection releases from 2022. First of all, a Happy New Year to everyone watching this. I'd been meaning to make this video last week, but unfortunately after the Christmas break, I caught a bit of the flu, so I'm still sort of recovering from that, but I'm able to make this video. So in preparation for making this video, I was looking back at all of the Criterion Collection releases from last year. And on reflection, I think it was a great year for the Criterion Collection. We got so many new films added to the collection, so many upgrades from DVD to Blu-ray, and of course we even had the first full year of 4K releases from Criterion. I didn't manage to buy everything that I wanted to from Criterion last year. I mean, that's just, the way things are at the moment. But I did get quite a lot of releases and I did have to narrow down this list to 10. It was a bit difficult. So there's plenty in this list for you to sink your teeth into. There are some 4K releases, some standard Blu-rays, and there's a couple of releases on this list that were released in the UK on Region B discs as well, so there should be something here for everyone. If you do want to add some of these titles to your own collection, then I will include some purchasing links in the description down below, which if you use, it does help support this channel at no additional cost to you. And with that said, let's just get straight into the list. In 10th place, we have this release. This was quite a special surprise from Criterion last year. It's Shaft, and this is the 4K release. Now, this also includes the sequel, Shaft's Big Score, on one of the Blu-rays within the package. So you're actually getting two films here rather than one, which I think not a lot of people realised just from looking at the front cover, because it's not advertised on here. So you're actually getting two films for the price of one. I say that this was a bit of a surprise from Criterion because Shaft has had plenty of releases in the past. It's a very accessible film, very easy to get your hands on. So it was a bit of a surprise that Criterion decided to put this one out, but the addition of the 4K restoration on here really made sense, and I'm very glad they decided to do this. I was very impressed with how the film looked on the 4K disc. The detail was incredible, it's very filmic, lifelike, and the addition of the HDR grade really did amp up some of the colours in this film, some of the reds and the greens, and I just was so overjoyed with how it looked. On a complete side note, I think this would make a great double bill with Taxi Driver from Martin Scorsese, because both films give what I think is a truthful look at New York City in a period where it wasn't the nicest place to be by all accounts. And I do wonder if this is a film that Scorsese had seen before making Taxi Driver, because this was 5 years before that film came out. It also sounds great on the disc. You've got that iconic score from Isaac Hayes, and there's a bunch of special features in this package along with the second film, like I mentioned before. So if you're on the fence in getting this, I think this is well worth your consideration. Next up is a much anticipated release from a certain type of cinephile, and the film I'm talking about is Pink Flamingos from John Waters. Now, this is a film that I probably would recommend to no one. Like, it's not a very easy recommendation for me to make. That's because, if you're not aware with who John Waters is, he is an icon of American independent cinema around the time of the 70s onwards. And in his films, he really sought to provoke and to shock and to amaze the viewer. And there are many things in his films which truly are shocking, disgusting, nasty, and they're all in this film as well. You get all of that. The film is even described as an exercise in poor taste, and it's presented in this slipcover, which is meant to be like a brown paper bag, as if it's like something that shouldn't be shown in public. You don't want to be seen carrying this around. Inside as well, you also get the nice addition of the bath bag, which I haven't used yet. Should I be using it for the authentic experience? I'm not too sure about that, but maybe I'll save that for for one day when I'm looking for that special experience watching Pink Flamingos. To me, John Waters is kind of at the opposite end of the spectrum to John Cassavetes. You know, these are two guys, two Johns, two titans of American independent filmmaking, but making such radically different films. Even though the film was made for such a low budget and on equipment that wasn't of the highest standards, the film still looks very good on the 4K digital restoration. And there's a bunch of special features in here which I loved going through, especially the conversation between John Waters and Jim Jarmusch about this film and the making of it. So if that sounds like it could be your kind of thing, then yes, this is one to have in your collection, but I would say approach with caution. Number 8 on my list is The Girl Can't Help It, the Frank Tashlin movie, which just absolutely dazzles me. Now, I mentioned this following Pink Flamingos because this is one of John Waters' favourite films. And I mean, you can tell that because The Girl Can't Help It, the title track in this movie, is featured in Pink Flamingos. And John Waters is even on the special features of this disc talking about his love for this film. So it makes kind of a good double bill. If you're not familiar with the films of Frank Tashlin, he was a great satirist at, pointing the finger at things in American society. He'd made films about the advertisement industry, and this is, pointing the finger at the entertainment industry. Because the central idea of this movie is, can you make someone famous even if they have zero talent? And in a way, it's kind of maybe meta-textual because people often said that Jane Mansfield was completely talentless beyond looking good. So there's that element there, and it's just very well done. It's very clever, but it's also very entertaining. And even if you don't want to look into the kind of satire of it all, you can just sit and watch it and listen to all the music, and it's a great fun film. Number 7 on the list is the film Walker from Alex Cox. Now, Alex Cox is a great filmmaker, perhaps underrated, dare I say that dreaded word, and he's a great lover of cinema. He always pops up on other Blu-rays in the special features talking about spaghetti westerns and Italian movie stars. So I just always appreciate his insight into cinema, but his films that he made are also brilliant. This was an upgrade from an old Criterion DVD, and I think this is one of 3 of his films in the collection, along with Repo Man and Sid and Nancy. And this one is a very peculiar movie because you watch it and you think that you're watching this historical period drama about manifest destiny and these people trying to explore and colonize North America, when actually it goes into very satirical arenas. It uses lots of different filmmaking techniques. There's some weird anachronisms in this, a lot of jarring things going on in this movie. I won't spoil it, but this film is not what you think it's going to be. There's a great commentary on here, some other great special features about the making of the film. And the film itself, it feels like it was very urgent for the filmmakers. They really went to great lengths to make this film. So I really appreciate having it on the Criterion Blu-ray, and that is why it's one of my favourites from last year. Number 6 on this list is the film Round Midnight from the late Bertrand Tavernier. This is a film all about jazz music and this musician who is, very accomplished, well regarded, but he struggles with alcohol addiction. So it's at times a very serious movie, but it really is a love letter to jazz music and the scene in Paris, where a lot of American jazz musicians would leave America, come to Paris to really pursue their craft and the love of the art. Jazz musician Dexter Gordon himself is playing the lead role in this movie, so that adds this extra layer of authenticity. There's a brilliant soundtrack from Herbie Hancock, and the direction from Tavernier is absolutely top-notch in this movie. The 4K digital restoration looks amazing, and I wish that this was on a 4K disc, because it could have been amped up that bit more, but it still looks amazing on the standard Blu-ray. There's tons of special features in it, and it's just a wonderful film. This disc was released in the UK on a Region B Blu-ray, which I have here, so if you can't play the US discs, then this is one on this list that you can experience, and I wholeheartedly recommend it if you are a fan of jazz music. Number 5 on this list is Rouge from Stanley Kwan. This is a Hong Kong movie about love across generations and even love persisting after death. It's very melodramatic, it's very colourful, it's very evocative of the two periods that are shown here. There's the present day 1980s, and then there's the 1930s, which it just looks beautiful. Stunning set design and costume design. It's a wonderfully touching movie, quite sad in parts, but just one that I find beautiful to look at. So if you're in the mood for a bit of a love story, if you're into some Hong Kong cinema, this is one I definitely recommend checking out. There's some great special features on here, to get into. The 4K restoration as well, again, looks amazing. I wish this was on a 4K UHD disc, but sadly not. And again, this just highlights one of the reasons why I love the Criterion Collection so much, is that this was a bit of a blind buy for me. I didn't know the film at all, really, before it was announced. And, I took a gamble on it and it paid off so well. So that's why this is one of my favourite releases from last year. Number 4 on the list is Written on the Wind, the movie from Douglas Sirk, the melodrama master, who went on to inspire so many great filmmakers, namely Rainer Werner Fassbinder. So if you're a fan of Fassbinder and you haven't gone back and looked at all of the films of Douglas Sirk, then I definitely recommend doing that. This was such a high-scoring movie for me last year because I just absolutely love the style of Douglas Sirk, and to see it presented here on a new restoration, it was beautiful to look at. And it just reminded me how much I love the central performances from Dorothy Malone, Rock Hudson and Robert Stack, who also teamed up with Douglas Sirk on The Tarnished Angels, which is one of my favourite Sirk movies. But that's another point. A lot of people kind of turn their nose when they hear the word melodrama because it has such negative connotations to it. But when in the hands of a master who knows what they're doing, they are able to elevate the material so that even though what you're watching is not realistic and would never actually happen, there can be so much truth in the fiction. So yeah, I was just so happy with this release, one of my favourites of the year. And again, this is another Region B release, so if you're in the UK, you can pick this one up too. So we're at the top 3 now. My number 3 movie on this list is Mr. Klein from Joseph Losey. I've talked quite a bit about Losey on this channel in the last year or two. I think he's a hugely underrated director, made so many great movies, and this is one of them. This is certainly one of his best. The film stars Alain Delon, who is just always, magnetic to watch. I love watching him. And he plays this art dealer living in Nazi-occupied France during the war. And he is taking advantage of the Jews who are desperate to flee, to survive, by taking the artwork from them at cut rate prices. He's really abusing what is going on for his own personal gain. But the inciting incident of this movie is that he gets mistaken for someone with the same name as him who happens to be Jewish, and therefore he is sort of hunting down for this other person with the same name as him, while also becoming very paranoid that he is being followed because people think that he is this Jewish man. It's extremely well done, all about paranoia and the kind of wrong man syndrome and being flung into this world that, he doesn't anticipate being flung into. I've said before, it reminds me a lot of films like Eyes Wide Shut from Stanley Kubrick. And I have no idea if that was an influence on Kubrick, but that would make a great double bill. And perhaps I'll do that sometime soon. But the disc itself from Criterion, there's a 4K digital restoration on here. I believe there's a bit of controversy around the colour on this movie. Have the colours been changed as to how the film originally was? When I watched it on this disc, I didn't have any problems particularly with the colours, but I wasn't comparing it with anything before, so I haven't done any side-by-side comparisons or anything like that. But I do know a lot of recent restorations have undergone this process of colour changes, and it's an interesting topic because we want these films to be restored, we want them to be preserved, but is it worth the cost of the colours being changed? Do we just have to put up with it? I mean, that's a topic for another day. But it might put off some people if you believe that the colours do not look right on this disc. There are a few special features on here, not tons of them, but what is here I really enjoyed. So that is why this film is so high on my list for top Criterions of 2022. Number 2 on the list, this was a huge release from Criterion last year. A great surprise to many, many people, including myself. It's Raging Bull from Martin Scorsese. This is the 4K disc, and yeah, this was a huge surprise. I did not predict this one coming to the collection, but I'm very glad that it has done. The 4K presentation of this film looks amazing, and I know that there are some naysayers that think that for some reason films that are in black and white cannot benefit as much from a 4K restoration. That's completely not true. Even with high dynamic range, which most people attribute to more vivid colours, in actual fact, it really helps the contrast levels between the whites and blacks in an image. You often see on Blu-rays there are some really bad compression issues and digital artifacts in extremely dark portions of the screen. And you also see that when there is a black portion of the screen on an old Blu-ray, really all it is a dark grey. It's not truly black. And 4K, when done well, gets rid of that issue completely. And that's what you see on this disc. It looks absolutely great. You also get a bunch of special features on here. There's 3 audio commentaries. None of them are new as far as I'm aware. And I think the only new features on here are a few video essays. But nevertheless, there is a lot here to get into after you've watched the film. So, Raging Bull, a real surprise. And after all is said and done on 2022, it's one of the best releases of the year. And number 1, what I think is the best Criterion release of 2022 is Double Indemnity on the 4K Blu-ray. And this is glorious. It is a sight to behold. This is one of my favourite films of all time, so perhaps there is some bias there from me, but of course there's always going to be, because what can these lists be other than your subjective opinions? Anyway, this film looks so amazing on this disc. This is another surprise, another example of something that I wasn't anticipating coming to the Criterion Collection. So I was overjoyed when this got announced. Echoing much of what I just said about Raging Bull, a black and white movie can look amazing when done well on a 4K disc, and Double Indemnity really benefits from being on this new format. There's a load of special features on here, there's an audio commentary, there are some new features that have never been on any release of this movie before, and there's a few ones that are going into the work of Billy Wilder himself. There's a documentary, and I just love Billy Wilder. Definitely one of my favourite filmmakers. I know I say that a lot about so many different filmmakers, but when it comes to Billy Wilder, it is definitely true. And I really hope we see more of his movies enter the Criterion Collection. You know, it would be great to see something like Sunset Boulevard, or maybe even some of his lesser known films coming to the collection with new restorations. You know, I'm talking about films like Avanti and Fedora, you know, some of his later works, which a lot of people overlook, or even going back to The Major and the Minor, you know, of course, upgrades of Ace in the Hole, things like that would just be absolutely amazing. So hopefully we see that in the future. But for now, I'm so happy with this, and it was my #1 disc from Criterion last year. So there you have it. Those were my top 10 releases from Criterion in 2022. Like I said at the start, I didn't get to pick up everything that I wanted, so there'll be a few notable omissions from this list. Particularly, I really want to get the World Cinema Project Volume 4, because that looks absolutely right up my street. And there's a few of the later 4K discs that came out at the end of the year, which I still haven't gotten my hands on. So that's why they're not on this list. But there was so much to choose from that I hope you won't disagree with any of the films that I chose to put on this list. If you liked hearing me talk about the best Criterion discs of last year, then do click the video on screen now. It's me going through my entire Criterion collection, and it's a very long video, about 3 hours long, but there's so much to get into there, so many recommendations. So, you know, watch it in chunks or in one whole go, but I'm sure there's lots you can get from it. Anyway, thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you soon.